Hey everybody, it's the Sheriff Tree and we're doing another GLC set review. This time doing it for Shrouded Fable, which is a mini set, but there are a ton of impactful cards in this set, so I'm excited to do this. I'm a little bit late to the game, but here we are anyway. So we'll go through each type and all of the trainers and rank them 1 to 5. 5 being there's no reason not to play this, to 1 that is your me. And then at the very end of the video I will rank all of the GLC types. So without further ado, we're gonna go a little out of order because there's this Peccarunt promo, which is a dark type basic, which has the ability, as long as it's in the active spot, you put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon in between turns, and then its attack for 2 energy does 10 damage, and then they're poisoned, so it's really doing 60 damage, and then they can't retreat. So in a poison dark deck, I think this is a very solid addition, and I'm going to give it a 4 for poison decks. Okay, so now going into order into grass, first we have a Galvantula, which is super exciting. I think this might be the first standalone grass Galvantula. I know we had the dual type one, sorry. But stage 1 has the ability Compound Eyes. Attacks used by this Pokemon do 50 more damage if the opponent's active Pokemon has an ability, which is nice. That'll usually happen. And then for 2 energy does 50, and if it has any lightning energy attached, it does 80 more. So 130, so 100 if they have an ability and you don't have a lightning attached, it does 130 if they don't have an ability but you do have lightning, and if you meet all the requirements you are doing 180 damage for 2 energy, which is very good. And this is I think a nice addition to the grass deck that is more low to the ground, the one that plays like all the stage 1s. I think you could play this along with the Pepper Pokemon, and you could just run some like Rainbow and Aurora energy in it to meet the fire and the lightning requirements. And I don't think that's asking for too much, so I think this is a solid card. I'm gonna give it a 3. Next we have Decky Dewey. I know it's Decidueye, calm down guys. We have Decky Dewey for it's a stage 2 for 1 energy, draw until you have 7 in hand, but then it's a other attack for 1 energy again, 170, and discard a basic grass energy from your hand. If you can't, this attack does nothing. 170 for 1 is very, very nice. Yeah, I think this could be pretty good. Maybe in a less maintenance kind of deck, like maybe the stage 1 deck that doesn't accelerate too much, but I don't think you put this with like Gorilla Sword decks, but still pretty solid. I'm going to give it a 3. Then we have Tapu Bulu, which is a basic Pokemon, 140 HP, which is pretty solid. And for 4 energy, you do 220 and then 30 to yourself. But in a Venusaur deck, this is 220 for 2 energy, which is ridiculous, and it's on a basic. And doing damage to yourself, it doesn't really matter too much. I think this is a definite include in a Rillasaur deck specifically. Any other deck probably doesn't fit, but if you're playing Venusaur, this is a very good Pokemon, so I'm going to give Tapu Bulu a 4. And that's it for grass Pokemon. Onto the fire Pokemon. There is a new Future Iron Moth, which is a little too cute. Um, it has an attack for 2 energy for 30 and heal from this Pokemon the same amount of damage you did. And then for 3 energy, you do 120, and during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by ancient Pokemon. You're hardly ever being attacked by ancient Pokemon, so I don't think this really applies. I'm going to give it a 2. I think it's just too situational, and I think there are better options. So that is it for fire. And then onto water, we have Weavile. And for 2 water, you do 70 damage, and you discard all energy from this Pokemon, and your active Pokemon is now paralyzed. I think this is very strong. You pair this with Starmie and Excalibur, and you're doing this every single turn. Like, they are paralyzed locked, and there's only a few switch outs in their deck, right? They've probably got like Escape Rope and Guzma, and then like maybe Switch, and then Versus Seeker. So like, if you can consistently do this, I think you can lock your opponent a lot of the time. It does require a bit of setup to string these attacks, but I think this guy is very solid, very intimidating. So I'm gonna give him a 3. Does have a lot of setup, but very, very good. Onto Psychic, we have Hypno that does 80 damage for 2 energy, and during your opponent's next turn, if they attach an energy card from their hand to the defending Pokemon, their turn ends. This is kind of sick. Very interesting. I don't know how good this will actually be, but if they're kind of stuck in the active, I mean, they're probably attaching to the bench anyway, but I mean, it's cute. I'll give it a 3. It does a decent amount of damage and could disrupt your opponent. But yeah. Okay, on to Dusclops and Dusknoir. So I'm going to do these together. So Dusclops, stage 1, has the ability, once during your turn, you may put 5 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. Placing 5 damage counters can be very strong, especially in a spread deck, which is very good for Psychic. But you do the exact same thing with Dusknoir, except you put 13 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Like, you just snipe one of their like support Pokemon on an ability, right? So you're trading with them, but you're also like taking out something of theirs that really, really matters, and then you still get to attack for that turn. So I think these guys are insane. Very, very good. I'm gonna give them a 4. I don't think you put this in every single deck, but this is very, very strong. So next up is Cresselia. Basic 120 HP. For 1, you heal 20 from each of your Pokemon, I guess to counter those spread decks. But you're probably playing Bench Barrier anyway, so I mean, this doesn't matter too much. But for 3 Psychic Energy, it does 80, and then you can turn one of your face down prize cards face up, and if you do, you do 80 more. So 160 for 3 is decent. The only thing holding this back is its 3 Psychic. If this had a single colorless attack cost in it, this card would jump up a couple scores. But for 3, that is pretty expensive, because you do have to accelerate a couple energy with this guy, and you do not get help from like Dimension Valley and stuff. But I'm gonna give it a 2, maybe a 3. It's an interesting card. I'm leaning more towards 2. I don't think it's better than current options because you're doing the same amount of damage for the same amount of energy with other Pokemon, but those Pokemon can benefit from dimension values. So yeah, and that'll do it for Psychic. Next up is Toxicroak. Stage 1 for 2 energy, 50 damage, whatever, but 3 damage, 90 damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, this does 90 more. So 180 for 3 on a stage 1 is pretty good in an energy acceleration fighting deck. I think this is pretty solid. So I'm going to give Toxicroak a 3. But then we have Blood Moon Ursaluna. Basic, 150 HP, pretty beefy dude. And when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may attach up to 2 basic fighting energy cards from your hand to this Pokemon. So it's just like the Galarian birds, right? So we have this on a fighting Pokemon with Galarian Zapdos, but that I don't think is as impactful as this, because for 3 energy, 100 damage, and it does 30 more for each damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon. It's very easy to spread damage with fighting. You've got the Hitmons, you've got what is it, Ting-Lu, the moose guy. You have and then you have Sandygast. So I think this is very good if you're playing those cards, and you're essentially doing this for 1 energy, manually attaching to him a single time and attacking, if you can get the energy in your hand. So I think this is very good. I think this is a very strong guy. I'm going to put him as a 4. Fighting just keeps getting very, very strong attackers. They just need some draw support, and once they do that, they're going to be a top deck. He's a very good guy. And then another ancient Pokemon that we'll talk about, Slitherwing. For 2 does 20 damage. If they're a future Pokemon, you do 120 more, and then 130 for 3. You discard 2 from this Pokemon. I think the other Slitherwing is just way better in every way. I think this guy is a 2, just way too situational, just like its counterpart, the guy, the what is it? Iron Moth, yeah. So just a 2 for him. And that'll wrap it up for fighting. We'll go to Dark. We talked about Pekarant already as the promo. We'll now talk about Crobat. So stage 2 has the ability Shadowy Envoy. Once during your turn, if you play Janine's Secret Art from your hand this turn, you may draw cards until you have 8 in your hand. And then 120 for 2 energy, and they are now poisoned. During Pokemon Checkup, you put 2 damage counters on it instead of 1, so it's essentially 140 for 2. I think there are better Crobats to play than this, like the one that takes 3 prize cards or whatever. And there's also one that like spreads damage a little bit. I think this one, you get the benefit from its ability once, maybe, and you probably are playing Janine's Secret Art in a like a poison deck. I mean, I guess you don't have to. You could play it in any dark deck, which you probably should be, honestly. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think there are better Crobats. This is on a stage 2. I'm gonna probably just give it a 2. I don't think it's very impactful. And then we have Malamar, which is another supporter-specific attack. Stage 1 for a single energy, you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active, and you do 120 to the active. But if you didn't play 06 machinations from your hand during this turn, this attack does nothing. So Dark is in a spot where you kind of really need to be playing draw supporters a lot of the time. And I don't know how much you'll get the chance to use this attack. It's just too situational. You need all the pieces for this. And so I'm gonna give Malamar a 1. I think it's just too much of a need. But then we have Yveltal, which for a single Dark, put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. Pretty solid spread if you can spread with Dark. But I don't think that's Dark's strong point. A spread Dark deck isn't super great. So I'm going to give Yveltal a 2. I think just too situational. I think it's just too difficult to spread. And that will do it for Dark. On to Metal. We have this new Stage 1 Copperajah, 200 HP. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent can't play Stadium cards from their hand, and then 4 energy, you do 130. You can do 100 more, and if you do, this Pokemon can't attack next turn. So 4 energy, 230, that's kind of nuts. You're knocking out most things right there. And you can have a bulky metal deck where you're healing and tanking and whatnot. You've got your healing and damage reduction stadiums, and they just stay in play with this guy's ability, which is pretty good. So in a bulky metal deck, I think this is solid. I'm gonna put it at a 3. There is another Copperajah that I think could be just as good, the one that's been around for a while, but I think this is a contender with that other Copperajah. So then we have some dragons. There is this Fracture, which is definitely the best Fracture to play if you're going to play it, because whenever it's safe on the bench if opponents try to gust it or discard energy from it or something. Which is nice, but sometimes you won't even be playing this. Sometimes you'll use the Axew that cheats evolution. You probably want to play that Axew, it's the best one. But still, if you're playing Fracture, this is the best one to play. Next up we have a new Haxorus, which is a Stage 2, and for 1 fighting, if the active Pokemon has special energy attached, it's knocked out. So this is very strong against things like Colorless, which, well, I mean, it's not good against Snorlax, but, you know, other decks that run a lot of special energy, it's pretty strong against. And then for 2 energy, you're fighting in Metal, you're doing 230, and you discard the top 3 cards of your deck. So, similar attack to Garchomp, more damage, but more hurt on your deck, because you're discarding 3. But I think this guy is a pretty good attacker. So I'm gonna put him at a 3. And then we have Kyurem, and I have a lot to say about this guy. So, Plasma Bane. If your opponent has any cards in their discard pile that have Colress in the name, this Pokemon can use the Trifrost attack for 1 colorless. And 5 energy is Trifrost, discard all energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 110 to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. So, extremely good attack. Probably the best in the game, but the energy cost is ridiculous. So, here's the thing with Kyurem. You're never powering this up manually. It's way too slow. However, if they have Colress, then this card is the best card in your deck, right? And a lot of people will probably be playing the new Colress, but if they're smart players and they see you're playing Dragon, they will not play that card. Which can sometimes be good, but because you're denying them playing a card, but still. So if they play Colress, this card is the best card in the game. If they don't play Colress, this is a dead card in your deck. So meeting in the middle, I'm gonna give this guy a 4, because if they are playing Colress, this guy just wipes a board, right? But like I said, if they just don't play Colress and are smart players, then you're never going to use this guy. So, got to keep that in mind. And we're going to talk about the new Colress. Just you wait. Okay, and then for colorless Pokemon, honestly, nothing worth it. Yeah. Moving on to trainers. First, we have a new stadium, Academy at night. Once during each player's turn, that player may put a card from their hand on top of their deck. This is pretty situational. This could be good if you're doing things like playing Professor's Research or sprinting with Zebstrika. You could save a card that you really want to keep, preserve it a little bit before discarding your hand. Or if you're afraid you're going to get like Marnied or Iono, you could keep a key card that you need. But I think this is a little too situational, so I'm going to give it a 2. Next is Binding Mochi. Attacks used by the poison Pokemon this card is attached to do 40 more damage. And it is pretty easy to poison yourself in a dark deck, like Brute Bonnet, and Supporter that we'll talk about in 2 seconds. So in a poison, if you're playing this in dark, then it's good, but I think it's just too situational. It requires you to poison yourself, right? Which probably doesn't have too much of a downside if you're doing 40 more damage, but I don't know. I digress. I think this thing is a 2, just too situational. We have Cassiopeia. You can only use this if it's the last card in your hand. Supporter, by the way, sorry. Search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them in your hand, then shuffle your deck. This could be pretty good if you don't have a hand, but you're usually gonna have a hand. It's hard to play your hand down, I think, in GLC a lot of the time, so I think this is just a little too situational, and you're just playing teammates anyway, which is the same effect, but honestly easier to pull off, so I think it's a 2. Okay, Colress's Tenacity. New supporter. Okay. Search your deck for a Stadium card and an Energy card, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. Okay. Really strong effect. Some people are saying that this replaces Guzma and Hala, and I 100% disagree with them. Guzma and Hala is way better than this in every way, regardless of the discard of 2. 1, Guzma and Hala is searchable off of Tag Call, and as well as Guzma and Hala also gets you a tool which means like a TM evolution or a floatstone or U-turn board to retreat your active, which is like very, very important and can be the difference in a game. I think if anything, you play this in addition to Guzma and Hala to support that kind of play. I never think that you play this by itself. I always think you play Guzma and Hala over this card if you're just playing one or the other. As well as if you're playing Dragon, then this is a dead card in your deck. So you have to watch out for that. So I will give Colress's Tenacity a 4. It is a very good effect. I don't think it replaces Guzma and Hala, but it is very good to play this in addition to that card. Next we have Janine's Secret Art, a new supporter, and I do think this card is very strong. Choose up to 2 of your dark Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic dark energy card and attach it to that Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. If you attached energy to your active Pokemon in this way, it is now poisoned. So this is accelerating 2 energy to your Pokemon, and one of those Pokemon is Guzzlord, right? So this is very, very strong, and if you choose 2 of your benched Pokemon, this doesn't have a downside. So this is just very good energy acceleration for Dark. I think it... I would probably give this a 4, maybe even a 5, because this thing is ridiculous for Dark, which is already just way too strong. But very, very good supporter. I very much think you should consider playing this in your Dark deck. Then we have Night Stretcher. Okay, so new item. You put a Pokemon or a basic energy card from your discard pile into your hand. So this is such a good card. Like, you're never playing Revive ever again. You're just playing Night Stretcher because it is better than that in every way. And Revive is very good. So, one, you get to put any Pokemon into your hand instead of just getting back a basic, and you have the flexibility of getting a basic energy back from your discard. And that flexibility is just so nice. So this is definitely a 5. I think you should be playing this in probably every deck. This card is very, very good. Okay, new tool, Power Glass. At the end of your turn, after you attack, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active, you may attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to it. So, interesting. It's an interesting tool. You kind of accelerate energy, but the Pokemon has to sit in the active to get the energy attached to it, so it is a pretty big risk. So I'm gonna give this a 2, but it could be good if the Pokemon stays in the active and doesn't get knocked out. So yeah. And then very last card, Xerosix Machine. This guy. So your opponent discards cards from their hand until they have 3 cards in their hand. Pretty disruptive card. It is disruption, right? But it doesn't like give you additional cards, or like switches something out, right? So it has to be the right turn to play this, but pretty solid for a disruption card, especially, you know, in GLC where you only have 1 of each card, so even discarding a couple resources could be tricky. So I'm gonna give this a 3 for disruption cards as far as they go. And yeah, so that'll do it for the cards. If we switch over to our ranking, not a whole lot has changed. I think colorless and psychic are both tied for the best colors in GLC. I think everyone could agree with at least one of those. But then right under that, I think dark and lightning are still S tier. Spoiler alert, Raikou might get a ban soon, as well as Marshadow. I think Psychic still stays one of the, like, probably the best deck with colorless. It'll hurt Lightning a bit, but there are other really good Lightning lists, so. But for now, it's still an S. Then in A, we still have Dragon, and Water, and then Grass is what I have. Very solid. I feel like Grass gets additional things like every single set, like solid things. And then I have Fighting in B. I feel like it's so close to being here, but it just lacks in that draw support, right? It's so close. But then after that, I have Metal, and then Fire, and then, you know, obviously Fairy is always in D. But besides Fairy, I do think Fire is probably the weakest type out of all of them currently. So not much has changed here. But that's going to do it for this ranking video. Please let me know if you disagree with anything, and please let me know if there was a card that I did not include in the video that you would like me to cover, and I will have a discussion with you in the comments. Anyways, thanks guys. We will talk to you next time.